every religious person who takes the Genesis account of creation, say, seriously, 53% of Americans seemingly take it literally, but just even dignifying it as informative. Any person who's doing this is essentially saying to somebody like Stephen Hawking, Stephen, you're a smart guy. I see you got a lot of equations over there, but you essentially don't know enough about cosmology, because here, God did this in 6 days, and then he rested on the seventh, and I don't really, it could be a metaphor, but I don't see you really grappling with the nuances here, and they're essentially saying to someone like Richard Dawkins or Robert Trivers or any evolutionary biologist, they're saying, you're saying all this stuff about DNA and the fossil record and radiocarbon dating, but it says here that man was made in a separate act of creation, and that really we should ponder over that. And the fact that you use words like God and faith with such enthusiasm puts you in you are the shade under which all of these really barbarous forms of religiosity still relax and luxuriate and thrive. And the fact that we can understand the molecular constituents of chocolate doesn't make us not want to eat chocolate. I mean, these are different scales of interaction with the world. And so it's not a matter of only being coldly calculating in our approach to life, but where we have to call a spade is in gratuitous claims to certainty about invisible realities and the moral structure to the universe, about a God who so hates homosexuality that he will whip up tsunamis in defense of chaste heterosexual people. I mean, this is a vision of life that is animating millions and millions of our neighbors, and we have been cowed into not criticizing it. And you missed the point I wasn't criticizing your scientific credentials. You're an endocrinologist, you're an MD, you're not a theoretical physicist. With questions like, well, who are you to say that not always vomiting is healthy? What if you meet someone who wants to vomit, and he wants to vomit until he dies? Okay, how could you argue that he is not as healthy as you are? In talking about morality and human values, I think we really are talking about mental health and the health of societies. Water is 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen. This seems as value-free an utterance as human beings ever make. What if someone says, well, that's not how I choose to think about water. Okay, I'm a biblical chemist, and I read in Genesis 1 that God created water before he created light. So I take that to mean that there were no stars. So there were no stars to fuse helium and hydrogen into heavier elements like oxygen. Therefore, there was no oxygen to put in the water. So either water has no oxygen, or God created special oxygen to put in the water. But I don't think he would do that, because that would be biblically inelegant. Okay, if someone doesn't value evidence, what evidence are you going to provide to prove that they should value it? If someone doesn't value logic, what logical argument could you provide to show the importance of logic? Let me give you a sense of what it's like to be me having this conversation. It seems to me we could have been having this conversation 500 years ago. And life was difficult 500 years ago. There was a lot of despair. There were crops failed, and disease spread, and people suffered just instantaneous and catastrophic changes in their fortune. And it was the cause of all of this actually was well understood 500 years ago. It was witchcraft.
He says what you're tending to do with the much, much more is profoundly misleading.
And worse than that, and I'm not just talking about you, I'm talking about people, worse than that, it is on a continuum with what the really religiously infatuated and dogmatic are doing, And because you're using the same
Not
words,
scientifically dogmatic and infatuated.
but like that move itself is, I mean, so you can say, you know, you can talk about scientific fundamentalism as the corollary of religious fundamentalism. That's just a trick with words. There is no scientific fundamentalism that is analogous to religious fundamentalism. But that's a separate issue.
It's true, centuries of anti-Semitism pursued by Christians did feed into the hysterical animosity toward the Jews in 20th century Europe.
Let's not tangle, because
that's not the same thing as saying that, well, it's, you know, it's
Let me just
religion.
ask you one question then, okay? Let's say we're going to resolve the dispute in the Middle East this way. We're going to offer the Jews, the Israelis, Oregon. You know, we get into our heads, this is going to just solve the conflict. Why won't they accept Oregon as prime a piece of real estate as you want to give them in the heart of the United States? Move over here, no more suicide bombing, give the Holy Land to the Muslims. One, do you think they would accept that? And two, why not?
Well, in the early history of Zionism, they were given a number of such offers, and they rejected them. They rejected them in part for the reasons that you would certainly invoke of irrational religious belief about their right to that piece of land. That would be certainly part of it.
I mean, who are we to say even that they're wrong to beat them with lengths of steel cable or throw battery acid in their faces if they decline the privilege of being smothered in this way? Okay, well, who are we not to say this? Who are we to pretend that we know so little about human well-being that we have to be non-judgmental about a practice like this? I'm not talking about voluntary wearing of a veil. I mean, women should be able to wear whatever they want, as far as I'm concerned. But what does voluntary mean in a community where, when a girl gets raped, her father's first impulse, rather often, is to murder her out of shame? Just let that fact detonate in your brain for a minute. Your daughter gets raped, and what you want to do is kill her. What are the chances that represents a peak of human flourishing? The desperation you hear from me and the frustration is that we are wasting time. I mean, this conference is purposed toward convincing someone like you that we even have a problem with religion. And I find that just a phantasmagorically strange situation to be in. And that's, you know, I'm sorry to be so strident, but I think this really matters. You know, I mean, which one of us wins this argument? I think the consequences of that really matters. So, what would happen if I showed up at a physics conference and said string theory is bogus? You know, it doesn't resonate with me. It's not how I choose to view the universe at the smallest scale. I'm not a fan. Okay, well, nothing would happen because I'm not a physicist. I don't understand string theory. I'm the Ted Bundy of string theory. Okay? I just thought I should briefly respond to your comment, Scott, which I found to be remarkably eloquent and really amazingly censorious in this context. I mean, it was delivered as though with the eye of omniscience. There's no one in this room who understands religion. No one is evincing the intellectual or moral character necessary to really launch the criticism that many of us are attempting. We can talk about who the 19 hijackers were and how much economics or their own backstory of oppression played in their behavior. I would say none at all, and I would say the evidence is on my side. And I've looked at your own studies, and I know the kinds of interviews you do with jihadis, and we can talk about that data, but the larger critique here of religion is that religion is functioning by a double standard. The double standard is you should be respecting people's certainties when they are totally uncoupled to evidence, when they are actually vacuous in the way that you just described? We have not passed laws against believing Elvis is still alive. The problem is that whenever somebody seriously represents his belief that Elvis is still alive in a conversation, on a first date, at a lecture, at a job interview, he immediately pays a price. Yeah. He pays a price in ill-concealed laughter.
Right. Now, surely you can agree with him on that.
That is a good thing. Now, then he could rattle on about, this is not a scientific claim, this is a matter of faith. You know, when I look at you, I see you might be Elvis. I mean, he could do this. Also, I just want to say to you, Scott, there's a massive gulf between how you and I think about these issues, particularly the question of Islam. And I don't want my not dealing with that in this talk to signal that I haven't recognized this gulf or that I don't think others should recognize it. I mean, I think your talk, I thought I had a good theory of mind. I don't know what you are doing with yours in your talk on Islam. And you have a style of drawing that message, which is, you know, somewhat confabulatory in my mind. I mean, you have a blizzard of detail, much of which is orthogonal to the question at hand. And you know, you basically delivered this idea that, you know, soccer and friendship among men is the problem. It explains suicide bombing better than the explicit doctrines of jihadism and martyrdom and Muslim eschatology. And I think it's irresponsible. So Deepak just said some very, seems a strange word to use, but some concrete things that science can criticize. Any God who would allow children by the millions to suffer and die in this way, and their parents to grieve in this way, either can do nothing to help them or doesn't care to. He is therefore either impotent or evil.
People who think you can use the jinns, the devils, and harness their power for the reaction.
It's almost tempting to fund such a project. Yeah. Your run-of-the-mill serial killer in America, okay, who spent his life raping and torturing children, need only come to Jesus on death row, and after a final meal of fried chicken, he's going to spend an eternity in heaven after death.
It's called binding.
No, it's not. It's called absolute subjective ignorance of what's actually going on outside your consciousness. And when you look at the books and ask yourself, is there the slightest shred of evidence that this is the product of omniscience? Is there a single sentence in here that could not have been uttered by a person for whom a wheelbarrow would have been, you know, emergent technology? You have to say no. But when someone like myself points out the rather obvious and compelling evidence that God is cruel and unjust because he visits suffering on innocent people of a scope and scale that would embarrass the most ambitious psychopath, okay, we're told that God is mysterious. Happily, we do not assess public opinion by having New York Times journalists go out and live in the Muslim world and make friends and get a vibe. I mean, this is not a single well-run opinion poll would be worth 1,000 years of you wandering around the Middle East.
Well, come on.
No. Okay, how many? That's not
Wrong,
meant to be hyperbolic.
wrong.
Well, let me tell you. How many?
You can't possibly believe that about polls, Mike.
Well, all we've got are conversations. All we've got are conversations.
Man's lived there for 15 years, for God's sake.
How many people did you ask? How many people did you ask?
I've done it for 2 hours. How long, you know? Go on.
How many people did you ask whether they supported suicide bombing? You know, you could have lived there a long time and asked that question a lot and still not have done anything like the job that Pew did when they went into 9 countries and got a random sample, insofar as that was possible, of Muslims and asked 38,000 people that question. Okay, the responses were appalling. These are areas of genuine scientific uncertainty, but what is obvious is that the way to clarify this domain is not to pretend to know things you don't know.
Well, I'm sorry.
God loves me, don't you know? He cured me of my eczema. He makes me feel so good while singing in church. And just when we had given up hope, he found a banker who was willing to reduce my mother's mortgage. Okay. Given all that this God of yours does not accomplish in the lives of others, given the misery that's being imposed on some helpless child at this instant, this kind of faith is obscene. Okay. To think in this way is to fail to reason honestly or to care sufficiently about the suffering of other human beings.